So Tommy's been released from prison yet again, and he promises to have a freedom rally in September this year. Apparently it's going to be the biggest and best freedom rally London's ever seen. The only problem is there won't be an ounce of freedom going round because it will be all about grifting, won't it? Surely? Well, if not, isn't it about time, nearly 10 years after he jumped on the free speech bandwagon to grift millions, that he actually came up with a policy, a credible white paper, an agenda for reform? No, of course. That's the one thing you'll never see from Tommy. I absolutely guarantee it. All he does is tell you what's wrong. He'll never tell you how to fix it, either because he doesn't know, or because if he does know and succeeds in fixing it, then there's no free money from the free money tree, is there, called donations and grifting. So let me show you a white paper that I wrote called the Reform Charter. I wrote it in HMP Nottingham on Echo Wing in early March 2015, whilst on remand for hurty words awaiting trial at Nottingham Crown Court. I was released later that month and published it in early April 2015, which in turn that year led to me being nominated 3 times for Free Speech Awards. And the reason why I know what I'm talking about is not just the nominations for free speech, it's the fact that I don't do any grifting. So let's go and take a look at the Reform Charter, shall we? And then ask yourself, why is it Tommy Robinson and no one else in the centre right, because they're all whining about their right to free speech, can actually come up with a Reform Charter, and certainly not one anywhere near as detailed as the one that I've drawn up. Let's take a look together. Anyone who wants to campaign for reform had better make sure they have a reform charter or a reform agenda before they actually start, in actual fact. And that's one of the main problems with the centre right, isn't it? Quite apart from their imitation game and their gaslighting to cover their tracks, they have no real reform charter of any description. Here's one that I wrote in early March 2015 in Nottingham Prison, in actual fact, whilst on remand. And I was expecting to be released in the next few days. And indeed I was. And so when I was released from prison in early April, I actually published the Reform Charter, which was further to the reform agenda that I actually started in 2011, in actual fact, to campaign against gross misconduct and corruption and incompetence across the whole length and breadth of so-called public services, inverted commas, in Britain. So what we've seen from the centre right in all of these years is absolutely nothing. So they whine in particular about their right to freedom of speech. Absolutely right. You know, everybody has a right to freedom of expression. However, what they've done, in actual fact, Tommy Robinson in particular, the following year, 2016, jumped on the free speech bandwagon, realizing that what an enormous grift it could become, in actual fact. And that's exactly what he set himself to, grifting, which is all Tommy ever does. He's a grifter. And he grifted millions out of it, whilst claiming his free speech was under threat. Well, in actual fact, he was embroiled in 2 contempt of court cases. Technically speaking, not free speech, because in truth, he put those trials in danger of collapse because he breached reporting restrictions. I completely support reporting restrictions to ensure a trial cannot collapse, so that the defence does not have the opportunity to put forward an application to the court saying, look, our defendants can't get a fair trial because XYZ has published this, that, and the other about them, and that ensures they can't have a fair trial. And so I completely support that. Tommy was completely reckless in what he did, and he knows it, in actual fact. But, in keeping with everything else in the centre right, they just bang on about their right to freedom of expression without actually producing anything meaningful. There are no policies. They'll tell you what's wrong. They'll tell you what's wrong until the cows come home, in actual fact, because that's all part of the manipulative grift. It plays on the heartstrings, in actual fact. It opens the purse, the bank accounts, and that's all it's about, quite frankly. But Tommy himself has never done a thing for free speech in this country. His latest pantomime prison sentence in Wood Hill has done nothing for free speech. So, in actual fact, let's put it quite bluntly. The only way to reinstate free speech and to ensure institutionalized reform is to actually have a reform agenda, a reform charter, which I do in actual fact here. And I'm publishing it again at this time, having first published it in April 2015, and I published it again in June 2024. And so the simple fact is this: I do know how to reform the system. I intend to reform the system, and I've never done any grifting on the back of campaigning for free speech, and I don't intend to. That really is the truth. So, look, let's put things into the cold light of day. Anyone campaigning for free speech or the reinstatement of freedom of expression, more to the point, needs to have a reform agenda. They need to have detailed policies. And that's what I'm offering people: detailed policies, a detailed white paper to take forward the reform campaign. Nothing to do with fake Farage, of course. Forget that grifter and con man. So let's go back to Tommy. He wrote or co-wrote a book with McLaughlin, the communist, called Manifesto, but there was no manifesto for change. And we have to ask ourselves, why is it Tommy never comes up with any ideas to reform the country? So I'm sure you can see, having read the Reform Charter that I wrote in 2015 and published again last year in my book, Offended, the link of which is to the Amazon's page, that there is in actual fact a very detailed Reform Charter. And instead of getting behind all of these grifters and handing over your free money to them, what I suggest is that you actually back the Reform Charter. Because together we can and will succeed. But no one is ever going to succeed in reinstating free speech by following Tommy Robinson or any of the other centre-right grifters. Because to them it's all about grifting. And all they do is imitate and jump on the bandwagon, play the game and grift. I'm in this business basically to effect socio-political reform. Join me. Together we can do it.